So today, thank you so much, Anshul, for inviting me to talk about this. It's really AI in learning and teaching has become a passion for me now. And so this session is about fostering AI literacy in students. And I'm part of the Learning and Teaching Enhancement Unit, and I run our PG Cert program, Certificate in Teaching and Higher Education, but this comes out of mainly my area of being the Generative AI Working Group Coordinator. So I'm going to give you a little illustrate one of the principles right now. So I created this picture using an AI image generator called Night Cafe that has DALL-E, it has Stable Diffusion, it has different variants there. And here is how I'm being transparent with you that I didn't make this picture by hand. I didn't find it on some, stock image software, but I made it. And this is how I'm citing it. So this is a kind of good practice that if we're doing this when we're interacting with our students, when we're teaching, then that is modeling the kind of behavior we want them to do in their coursework with us. So that's why I'm pointing out the method that I used in doing that. So I think we are all living in a period of great challenges with AI. It sort of feels like, how can we find our way through this maze? We know that our students will need to use generative AI effectively, ethically, and critically in the workplace after university. There's very few jobs where they would not be coming in contact with that. So therefore, and it's embedded in the tools we use every day, increasingly embedded as well. So you might have noticed that a few weeks ago, PDF came up with an AI assistant embedded in PDF Reader. So, this comes up all the time. So therefore, we have to teach it to our students. We have to teach AI literacy somehow to our students so they can learn it in university and be ready for what comes next. But the sticky bit here is that the landscape for AI, even a year and a half after ChatGPT launched, that landscape is still changing rapidly. It's like standing on shifting sands and trying to make a map. It's very hard to do. So I'm going to tell you what I'm doing today is I'm presenting a model of AI literacy that our working group is working on. There are ideas for how teaching staff and academic developers can develop AI literacy in ourselves and therefore teach it to our students. But I want you to keep in mind, please, that this is a work in progress. We are planning to launch our AI literacy material this summer in time for start of next academic year. So this is like a preliminary glimpse of the ideas we're talking about. It's not a finished product at all. So I really want you to keep that in mind because it evolves even from within a week, this picture will evolve. So I want to talk a little bit about what we've been doing here at Aberystwyth University in terms of our institutional approach to responding to this AI landscape that we're in. There's a couple of key points here, and it kind of goes on in a sort of timeline. So I think one of the key things for us to think about is avoiding the extremes of panic on the one hand and uncritical enthusiasm on the other. Somewhere in that gray area in the middle is really the right place to be, although it can feel a little bit uncomfortable, like, is the answer yes or no? Well, that depends on the context. So we have tried to do that right from the beginning, which really started in January of 23, when we put this on the table. And we created the working group. I proposed a working group in January. We were created in February, and we coordinate efforts across the university, not just one team that is top down or one team saying everybody's got to do what we say, but we brought in people and we coordinate with other people who are doing their own thing so that we are all on message, and that really helps. We listen to students as well as staff, and we involve students in our working group and in a variety of other ways. And I think that's really crucial to do that listening. As you can well imagine, this whole thing, exploded on the scene in December of 22, and then it was Christmas and then January. So we formed our group at the beginning of February. we couldn't do everything all at once. We had to identify what is the most important thing to do first, and we focused on that. That really enabled us to be resilient and flexible so we could work rapidly. So we actually had our guidance for staff available for staff in March, and the group was only created in February. Then, we did a few series of cascading activities, and then, more development over the summer and more development that's going on now to be launched next summer, or this summer, actually. So one of the things that enabled us to work that rapidly is that we didn't try to invent the wheel. We used existing materials out there. I would say there's not a day that goes by. Sorry to say, it might be when I'm not officially on working hours even, keeping an eye out, finding interesting, useful things, evaluating them. So we're using things that exist out there, created by the wonderful, generous community of practice that is out there. And I think that includes, EmpowerED webinar people probably too. We adapt it, and then when we make something, we share it onwards. So it's a constant interaction. And I find that community of practice has been really valuable and supportive. I'll give you at the end, I'll give you some a handout with a list of resources you can click, and you can see some of those resources. Then within our community, within our university, I think it's also really important for us to communicate through multiple channels, not just send that one email that goes out to directors of learning and teaching, or one email that goes out to all students and think, okay, everybody knows this now. Because as I think we probably saw with Caroline, with your presentation as well, it might take more than one channel to really reach the people who need it. So it's sort of, I would say, a full frontal attack. So it's not an attack, it's a support. But, we try a variety of different ways to bring people on board and make sure that people know what's going on with this, because it is transformative for our higher education landscape. So here's a really brief picture of our working group. We report to the Academic Enhancement Committee of the university, and we include a range of people. The Academic Integrity Officer manages unacceptable academic practice. He's key on that. We've got representatives from each faculty. We've got the Student Union Education Officer, made a huge contribution this year and the previous one last year. Student support staff, all of these different perspectives are really crucial to have. Library and academic development teams, so a lot of the subject librarians are involved in this. A registry, unacceptable academic practice, and I'm part of the Learning and Teaching Enhancement Unit. And because I suggested this formation of the group, I'm the coordinator. But we're not just all making it up out of our own minds. As I mentioned on the previous slide, we are drawing on very sound expertise from across the sector. And this includes bodies such as QAA and JISC, Advanced HE sometimes, some of TEXO, which is the Australian equivalent of QAA, European Network for Academic Integrity. They did some wonderful early material. So, we're drawing on this expertise and trying to consolidate it and then roll it out to our staff. So what the working group does is we create guidance, we suggest policy wording, and we train staff and students. It's a lot, but we don't do it all by ourselves. So here's some of the things that we have done. So, these are all in some way or another collaborative with other people in the university. So the training for staff and the guidance for staff, there's a website with written guidance, and that was emailed out to departments as well. But training sessions on AI and assessment using the JISC tools, wonderful postcards, ideas for assessment in the AI age. AI and learning design based on another crowdsourced collection from Creative HE. So those are 2 training sessions that I designed for this year. And then the discussion forum, which is more of an open-ended discussion for staff and students together. The working group made a couple of student-facing videos, and those got embedded into a wonderful LibGuide created by my colleagues and librarian colleagues. Big props to librarians. So they created a LibGuide, and they gave us a page in the LibGuide. for our videos. So this is the student-facing material. And of course, we got the unacceptable academic practice wording changed. That was in March. I think we did pretty well last year to be formed in February and get this stuff done by March. So presenting work generated by AI as if it were your own is considered unacceptable academic practice. And so we're just working from that. And I think that's got enough flexibility built in for people to understand, we don't have to ban it completely. That's not possible. But there are some guidelines, and mainly it's about transparency. So I'll just show you a couple of slides from the staff guidance. So this is where we talk about risks and caveats. This is from a live session. So there are a couple of things to highlight here. This would be a key part of AI literacy, is to recognize that generative AI creates plausible untruths, hallucinated citations, and also in a higher education context, that students might bypass the learning process entirely if we don't design our learning right, if we're not clear enough with our students. So here's the slide that follows that one in the staff session. So how we can support our students in using it ethically. We can be transparent with them. Why are we asking you to do this? Why do we want you to read a load of books and write an essay? Why do we want you to go out in the field and take measurements and write a report? It's because you're going to develop those skills that you are going to need in the future. And that can help to motivate students to use, if they do use it, to use it appropriately and ethically, rather than put it in an assignment brief, take the output and submit as their coursework. So we emphasize the learning process and we make our expectations clear. The other big point that I emphasize in this session is encouraging our teaching staff to consider having a classroom activity where we can train our students in using AI critically, ethically, and effectively. And there are loads of ways to do that. And I will point you to places where you can get specific ideas for that. Doesn't have to be in every module, but maybe somewhere in each study scheme, it would be good to do this, and fairly early on, I would suggest. So that's what our advice for staff looks like. Here is a screenshot from the LibGuide. This is the page that we contributed. You can see we've got 3 really short videos, like 3 minutes each. Practical guidance, consult your lectures, and don't lose the learning. And then the other 3 tabs in here were created by colleagues outside of the working group. Well, some of them might also be in the working group. About, what is AI, using it in the library. So this is not all created by the working group. It was a collaborative effort. And I was really grateful for the opportunity to have our stuff put here, because this is where students will look for AI information. So the idea is there's one hub where students look as their first point of call, and one hub for staff to look at for their first port of call. In case you're interested in the put learning first, this is a slide from that guidance for students about that. Understand the reasons behind your assessments. Why would this help you learn? If you're using AI, improve on the output. Is this the best answer? Are the facts accurate? What's left out, etc.? And then don't rely on AI. This isn't a replacement for learning. It can be a tool you can use for learning. So if you are doing an assignment, evaluate authoritative, sources, find authoritative texts that you're relying on that for that information. And then that will help you to understand whether, and evaluate what the AI is producing. Don't use AI as a substitute for reading is what I'm saying here. And then the final thing in this slide is synthesize what you learn from multiple sources. And again, that's not just the AI, but bringing all these pieces of information in. And that's how the students can have a meaningful learning experience. And I think this kind of approach, if students can take these lessons on board, they will not use AI unethically. At least they're less motivated to use it to bypass the learning. But rather use it in the way we want them to, and then they can, when they go in the workplace, they can use it there. So that's the material that we had by the end of summer last year. But we need more. People are saying, what's AI literacy? We need to know. But when the landscape is constantly changing, new tools all the time, existing tools with new functions, or even existing AI tools that we've been using for a while, but then they change and they change again, and new ways of working with them. What does AI literacy mean in that context that we're living in? So we need a resilient model, and I'm going to give you here a sneak peek at what we are working on. It's a work in progress. It's not finished. And this is what we will be producing over the summer. So AI literacy guidance for staff and students, probably going to be a document and connected with training sessions for staff, or maybe training materials that staff can use with their students, possibly. I don't know. I really think that they need to be customized for the disciplines, though. So guidance plus training sessions. I want to let you know that I'm coordinating this with the efforts that JISC AI, or JISC Artificial Intelligence, that's the group in JISC led by Sue Atwell. They're developing their own idea about AI literacy, so I'm coordinating what I'm doing here with what's happening there. But this at the moment is our product. There's one core concept, though, with AI literacy, and I see it come out again and again in many of the materials that I look at. And that is to keep the human in the loop. So it's not put in a prompt and get output, and that's the product. But the human critical thinking is involved in every stage, and always improving, evaluating, and improving the product before you send it out into the world or use it in any way. So, preliminary thoughts. I think what we need really is a two-tiered guidance, 4 to 5 principles at the top level, and each of those principles will have some concrete practices under them. So the idea is that the principles will be for everyone to use, will apply to staff, students, all different kind of contexts. They'll have generalized wording, top-level concepts, will be applicable to every category of person who might be using this. And not, therefore, because of this changing landscape, I don't think they can be specific to tools, because the tools are constantly changing. So it's more of a higher level concept. And that will enable these principles to remain stable. So we're only looking at maybe 4 or 5 principles. Each principle will have practices under them, and here's what the practices will look like. Concrete, specific wording. What the principle looks like in practice. So, what should I really do? And that will include, that's where the guidance for prompting would appear under the practices. And the practices then can be customized for different audiences. So the same principles for everybody, but for students, it might look like this, and the practice might look like this. For staff, teaching staff, the practice might look like something else. For staff in other roles, the practice might be yet different again. And then within the practices, we can be more tool specific. So that's where this idea of prompting or understanding some of the ethical issues where things are maybe changing over time, that's where that will appear. And that means that if we decide at a certain point, oh, we need to add a new practice, or we need to update this existing practice, we're just changing one component in the whole thing. We're not changing the whole framework for AI literacy, because the landscape, it's different every week. So I think this will give us that agility to work well. So this is a rough version of the practices. Again, the principles rather. Please keep in mind, this is in development. I revised this twice this week, so the final product might look different from this, but this is my best thinking as of this moment today. So I've got 5 principles here. The first one is understand. So what do we want to understand? What AI can do, what it can't do, how it works, the basic ideas of that. Because there are some myths that people might think AI is capable of, but it's really not. What can the specific tools do? And there are literally many thousand tools out there, many thousand. We can't know all of these. So which ones are the ones you're looking at, and how do what can those tools do? How do they work? the ethical and legal implications, and I could give a whole talk on that, but I'm not going to go into it right now. There's a lot of environmental, there's a lot of exploitative labor behavior, resource diversion, etc., copyright, intellectual property, data protection, all kinds of things there. So deep breath on that one. But we need to understand that even if we can't do anything about it, because it might inform our choices. So the next one is about choosing. So what do we need to choose? We need to know enough about the tools to choose the right tool. We need to know the right way to use that tool. You don't need to know how to use everything that's out there. Not possible. Not even specialists. And I mean the people at JISC who do nothing but this. How does anybody keep up? When there might be 25 of these being rolled out every day. So we look at the tools we're using and what is the right way to use it, the best way to use it. And I think when we're choosing a tool, we need to think about equity and data protection issues. How are we using it? So I put that in here again. So one of the equity issues for us as teachers, I'm just going to put this out. This would be a practice rather than a principle. But what this would look like as a teacher is you're thinking, some of my students are better off financially than others. So the ones who can afford to pay for the premium version of a tool will pay for the premium version and get a better tool. If it's not something that's offered centrally by my university, they have to go out. Maybe there's a free version and a paid subscription. The free version's not as good as a paid subscription product. So there's equity involved here. I can't require my students to use something where some can only afford the free one and are therefore disadvantaged compared to the ones who have more money and can pay the subscription. That's the kind of thing we might see as a practice under that choosing. But I think we really need to know that information. The next one is critique. So this is critiquing the output. Is it true? Is it incomplete? Is it overly generic? Is it biased? We know that these tools, these large language models, these AI platforms have been trained on biased data. So we need to factor in, look at what it's producing for us and say, okay, is that bias reflected in this output? And if it is, what can I do to address that? Then we need to use it. And I would say there are 3 key principles here. Try to use it effectively, be transparent about how we're using it, and use it ethically. And again, there'll be multiple practices under that. And then once we've gone through this whole process, we need to have a couple of decisions we need to make about AI. So is the output good enough? Is it actually helping us or not? Maybe the output isn't such a big help that it's worth the time we spend doing it. And then that links to the next one. Is it saving time with all of the checking, all of the critical evaluation? Is it saving us time? And in some scenarios, the answer is yes, it's saving us time. And yes, the output is great. And in other scenarios, maybe we say, you know what? It takes more time to do it with AI than it took to do it without AI. Or, yeah, I can get something, but it's just not very fit for purpose. I'd rather have a more customized set of learning materials that I'm creating for my students. So there'll be different questions in terms of the practices that line up with these principles. So staff will need to think about it from one angle, students will think about it from a different angle. But I think these 5, right now I'm thinking these 5 things. It might be a different number next week. As I say, this is literally in development right now. Our group has been meeting this month and we've had multiple conversations. So that's a first picture at the practices, at the principles rather, and then the practices will be underneath of that. So there are no easy answers with AI. There simply aren't, and I do not anticipate that this is going to be wonderful, next year, so much more reliable next year. I know that staff are busy. We heard about that from the last speaker. Staff are busy, they don't have a lot of time, and they would really like to have a clear-cut answer, a yes or no kind of answer, but we're really in that gray area. So here are sort of my takeaway messages on this. One is to keep the human in the loop. And I'm starting to see this pop up in things like Blackboard's guidance. And of course, this is in the, mentioned in the GIST guidance, mentioned in the QAA guidance, all of this stuff as well. Really welcome that, because I think that's the most important thing. We as human beings need to make those decisions. We don't just take the output as a given. So we need to keep the humans in the loop. We need to think critically. We need to be transparent with each other, with our students, have our students be transparent with us about how we're using it and how we make those decisions. And there are wonderful ways you can do this in your assessments. And then somehow we need to embed AI literacy in our teaching, whether that's a digital skills kind of training. I imagine we will, well, we already have our, digital skills for students incorporated as one of the channels of cascading out our messages. But I think also lecturers who are in a classroom with students every week, we can embed that literacy training into the teaching we do somehow. It will really help. So this is my contact information. And I've given, Anshul, I've given you a resource list. It's a one-page PDF with links to some of the materials that I mentioned.